The city pulsed under a generous sun, but Ricardo's heart, a millionaire in his 50s, seemed to live in a perpetual twilight, even amidst the opulence of his penthouse in downtown Sao Paulo. Ever since that accident nearly a decade ago stole the movement from his legs, he had become a master in the art of resignation. Despite maintaining an empire and a history of remarkable philanthropy, he felt life slipping through his fingers, drop by drop, like water lost from a cracked fountain. His wheelchair, once a symbol of his imprisonment, now felt almost an extension of his body, an invisible armor that isolated him from the world, even as he signed hefty checks for noble causes, always with the same polished silver pen, his only truly personal luxury. His wound was twofold, the physical, obvious to all, and the invisible, the deep longing for genuine connection, for someone to see him beyond his money or pity. He distrusted any kindness, believing that behind every smile lay a hidden agenda, a flaw that prevented him from fully opening up, from accepting unfiltered touch or gaze. On a grey afternoon, as a fine drizzle began to kiss the asphalt, Ricardo was driven by his chauffeur to one of the city's oldest parks, a refuge of damp lawns and ancient trees. The scent of wet earth and wildflowers, carried by the gentle breeze, was almost a tactile memory, an invitation to a life he believed he had lost forever. As he watched raindrops draw ephemeral patterns on the dark windows of his armored car, his eyes fell upon a figure leaning against a robust jacaranda trunk. It was Elias, a homeless man with features etched by time and hardship, yet with a gaze that seemed to carry stories of 1,000 battles and an unusual serenity. An ex-military man, Elias maintained a dignified posture despite his worn clothes and the tattered cloth scarf tied around his neck, a relic from another era, another world. Elias's gaze asked for nothing, it merely observed. There was none of the usual haste or deflection Ricardo expected from people when they saw him in his condition. This homeless man seemed to see him differently, as if reading his soul behind the tinted glass and invisible armor. Ricardo felt a shiver, a strange sensation of being truly seen, not just assessed. It was uncomfortable, almost invasive, yet at the same time, something in Elias's upright posture, even in the simplicity of his existence, commanded attention. His driver, João, a discreet and loyal man, noticed his employer's focus. "Mr. Ricardo, would you like me to offer him something? A snack, perhaps a warm jacket? It will get cold tonight." Ricardo hesitated. His philanthropy routine was calculated, mediated by institutions, never such direct contact. But Elias's gaze held him. "Yes, João. See what he needs." João stepped out of the car, walking cautiously towards Elias, who didn't even move, merely followed his approach with his eyes. A brief, low-toned conversation ensued, and then João gestured to Ricardo. The millionaire, for the first time in a long while, felt an unusual impulse. He asked João to open the back door, and with the driver's help maneuvered his wheelchair out, feeling the damp, fresh park air on his face. He approached Elias. The homeless man did not bow, did not extend a begging hand. He simply fixed his gaze on Ricardo, a look that seemed to know everything without judgment. Elias then spoke, and his voice, though hoarse with time, carried an unexpected clarity. "You have a very good heart. You've helped many people, I know. But you also carry a great pain, don't you? One that money cannot buy, nor pity alleviate." Ricardo felt a shock. How did this man know? He never spoke of his invisible pain. Before he could formulate a response, Elias continued, with unsettling calm. "I will make you walk again." Such a promise, uttered by a man in those conditions, would be laughable to anyone, an affront to logic, to medicine. But in Elias's mouth, it resonated with a conviction that penetrated Ricardo's armor of skepticism. It was as if time stood still there, between the drizzle and the scent of earth. What would you do in Ricardo's place? What is the name of your city, and where are you watching this story that has barely begun? Ricardo stared at him, searching for any sign of charlatanism, of madness, but found only the same serenity, the same unshakable dignity. The tattered scarf around Elias's neck, a faded shade of blue, seemed to be the only thing connecting him to any human fragility, a contrast to the strength of his gaze. How can you say such a thing?" Ricardo asked, his voice weaker than he expected. Elias smiled, a small, almost imperceptible smile that didn't reach his lips, but illuminated his eyes. "I see more than eyes can show, Ricardo, and what I see in you is a faith that is dormant, suffocated by disillusionment. It's not about what I can do, but about what your faith can move." João, who observed the scene from a respectful distance, seemed as perplexed as Ricardo. This encounter was unlike any other. Elias didn't beg, didn't tell sad stories to elicit sympathy. He simply spoke with a silent, almost mystical authority. Ricardo, accustomed to controlling every aspect of his life, felt disarmed, exposed. This homeless man didn't see him as the millionaire in a wheelchair, but as someone who needed something far greater than money. He spoke of faith, of invisible pain, of something Ricardo had buried so deeply he had almost forgotten it existed. Was this madness? Manipulation? Or was there in Elias's hoarse voice a truth that he, with all his fortune and knowledge, had never dared to seek? The drizzle intensified slightly, and the smell of wet vegetation grew stronger, enveloping the two men in a silence laden with impossible possibilities. That worn blue scarf was still the only thing that seemed vulnerable about Elias, such a small detail, yet it stubbornly stood out in the tableau of that day. Ricardo deeply inhaled the heavy, drizzly air, trying to find a logic in that encounter, a flaw in Elias's words. He, a man of numbers and certainties, stood before a figure who challenged everything he knew. The promise was absurd, futile. How could a man, homeless, without visible resources, even contemplate such a thing? Was it a trick? One of those stories the big city invented to test the faith of the unwary. But Elias's gaze held no malice, no desperation that Ricardo was used to seeing in the eyes of those asking for help. There was a kind of quiet, almost ancient authority. He thought of the doctors, the renowned specialists who had examined him over the years, the expensive therapies, the hopes that withered one by one. Every diagnosis, every prognosis, painted an irreversible picture. His paralysis was an irrevocable sentence, a scientific fact. And now a man with a faded scarf around his neck, standing in the drizzle, spoke of miracles. Ricardo's logical mind screamed in protest, but something in his chest, a place he had kept locked for a long time, felt a slight tremor. Was it just the damp cold, or the fear of allowing himself to dream again? Elias, as if reading his thoughts, took a slow step, moving a little closer to Ricardo's wheelchair. His eyes did not waver, and the dignified posture he maintained even in his worn clothes was remarkable. There was no subservience, just a strong presence. "Faith, Ricardo, is not a check you sign," Elias said, his voice a little softer now but still charged with a strange authority. "It is the bridge you build in the abyss between what you see and what you believe to be possible. And your bridge, it is there, waiting to be crossed." Ricardo felt a pull. He had always prided himself on his pragmatism, on his ability to see the world as it was, without illusions. But Elias was speaking of a world beyond the concrete, of something that he, with all his wealth, had never been able to buy or control. João, the driver, remained silent, observing the scene as if watching a movie, a veiled expression of concern on his face. That day in the park was proving to be very different from any other day in the millionaire's life. "So what should I do?" Ricardo asked, his voice almost a whisper, feeling strangely vulnerable. He had never asked for instruction from anyone who wasn't one of his directors or advisors. Elias pointed to his own chest with a finger, where the blue scarf nestled over his thin shirt. "You must allow yourself to feel. Let go of doubt, even for an instant. Look at me, Ricardo. What do you see?" Ricardo looked. He did not see a beggar. He saw a man, yes, in old clothes, but with a strength that transcended his condition. His eyes lingered on the blue scarf, the same one that had already caught his attention. There was a peculiar fold in it, almost as if it held something, or as if it had been folded with a purpose. A detail, perhaps insignificant, but one that Ricardo's mind, accustomed to analyzing every detail in his business, could not ignore. It was a deep, faded blue, but still with traces of a color that had once been vibrant. A simple piece of fabric, but one that seemed to carry a silent story. "I see a man," Ricardo replied with surprising sincerity. Elias smiled again, the same restrained smile that lit up his eyes. "And that's what matters. Not what I don't have, but what I am. And what you are, Ricardo, is a man who needs to reconnect with the purest part of himself." He extended a hand, a calloused but firm hand, and lightly touched Ricardo's shoulder. There was no pain, no shock, just a gentle warmth that spread through the millionaire's body, a sensation he hadn't felt in a long time. It was a human touch, without ulterior motives. The drizzle stopped, and the timid sun tried to break through the clouds, painting the sky in shades of grey and silver. The smell of wet earth was now accompanied by a purifying freshness. Ricardo, still under the effect of that touch, noticed something strange. His polished silver pen, the one he used to sign all his donation checks, the one that never left his inner jacket pocket, was missing. He reached into his pocket, and the emptiness surprised him. He was sure he had put it there before leaving. Did it fall in the car or on the park ground? It was an object of sentimental value, more than financial. He looked at Elias, who seemed oblivious to his small consternation. The homeless man merely watched the horizon, as if awaiting a sign. The silver pen, a symbol of his controlled life and distant philanthropy, was now lost. A small flaw in his meticulous daily routine, a detail that bothered him more than he would like to admit. That pen was a cornerstone of his existence, of his routine. Its absence at that moment seemed like a premonition, a break in the pattern of his rigidly organized life. Elias then turned to Ricardo, his eyes fixed on his. "Before any miracle, Ricardo, you must detach. Let go of what binds you. And sometimes what binds you are not visible chains, but the small luxuries that give you a false sense of control." He did not mention the pen, but his words seemed to echo the loss Ricardo had just felt. Was it a coincidence? Or did Elias know something more, something Ricardo still did not understand? That conversation, that touch, the lost pen. Everything mingled in Ricardo's mind. He felt an urgency, a need to understand more about Elias, about that promise, about the strange sensation of hope that was beginning to blossom in his chest, despite all his reason. It was as if the park, the drizzle, and time itself had conspired to place him before a mirror that reflected not his image, but his soul. This is the moment to reflect on Elias's words and Ricardo's attitude. Can faith truly move mountains, or is it all a grand illusion? If you have ever felt the need to believe in something greater than logic, in something that transcends the everyday, comment "invisible faith" and tell us your experience. Your story could be the next to be told. Ricardo returned to the car, but the park, the drizzle, and the smell of wet earth seemed to have left a deep mark on his soul, something the luxury of his armored vehicle couldn't erase. The silence on the way back to his penthouse in downtown São Paulo was heavy, filled not by the gentle hum of the engine, but by Elias's impossible words. "I will make you walk again." That phrase echoed in his mind, alternating between the most insane and the most desired promise of his life. The silver pen, his amulet of control and success, remained missing. He searched his pockets again, then asked João to check the car's upholstery, under the seat, in every crevice. Nothing. The object, so small and routine, now seemed to carry an immense symbolic weight. Its absence was an uncomfortable reminder of the conversation with Elias, of that strange connection between detachment and miracle. Was it a test, or just a carelessness that by chance happened on the most surreal day of his life? João, the driver, who had witnessed the scene, was visibly disturbed. At a traffic light, he cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Mr. Ricardo, with all due respect, that man, are you sure he's in his right mind, talking about making you walk again? It's a very serious thing." João's concern was genuine, his voice laden with a skepticism Ricardo understood perfectly. It was the voice of reason, of the logic he himself had defended for years. But something within him resisted. "João, I don't know what to think," Ricardo admitted, something rare in his always controlled demeanor. "But there's something about him, something different." João shook his head, stopping the car in front of the imposing gate of the building. "Different, yes, sir, but the world is full of people who take advantage of others' hope. A homeless man, saying he can perform miracles. It sounds like a charlatan, if I may." João's words were like a mirror of the social pressure, of the public opinion Ricardo knew he would face if he even considered giving credit to it. The emotional cost of opening himself to such a fragile promise was immense. That night, the luxurious penthouse seemed even emptier. Ricardo couldn't sleep. Instead of his nightly routine of reading financial reports, he found himself researching miracles and spontaneous cures on the internet. Every scientific article that debunked such phenomena felt like a punch to the gut. But every story of faith, even if anonymous and unverified, ignited a spark of hope he feared. He felt divided, a rational man confronted with the inexplicable, and the mental exhaustion was almost as draining as the physical. What was he looking for, after all? Proof? Confirmation of his own madness? The next day, the first thing he did was ask João to go back to the park. Go to the jacaranda tree, João. See if he's still there. And if you find him, try to talk a little more. Without him realizing you're investigating. Ricardo felt like a detective of his own faith, a cruel irony for someone who had always scorned mysticism. João, though reluctant, was loyal. Hours later, he returned with a serious expression. He wasn't there, sir. But I found an old woman who sells coconut water near the park. She said Elias appears there from time to time, and that he has a peculiar reputation, shall we say. João hesitated, and Ricardo urged him to continue. She said he's known for saying things that seem impossible, but sometimes they happen, and she showed me something. João pulled out a crumpled piece of old newspaper, yellowed with age. It was a clipping of a small neighborhood news item, no visible date, but with a black and white photo. The photo showed a man in military uniform, smiling. And, though younger and with features less marked by life, it was undeniably Elias. The headline was short: War hero returns but finds new personal battle. The article spoke of a decorated sergeant who had returned from a peacekeeping mission in a distant country, but who, after the shock of war, had become disillusioned with civilian life, losing everything and choosing to live on the streets. It was a partial exposé, but it revealed a story of pain, of sacrifice, and of a fall that seemed to contradict the serenity Elias now displayed. How could a man who lost so much, who fell so deep, have that peace and make such promises? The newspaper, old and incomplete as it was the first concrete piece of evidence, a fragment of Elias's past that clashed with his current image. That report, however old, was a verifiable record, a piece that fit and didn't fit at the same time. It was a puzzle, and Ricardo felt many pieces were missing. That headline in itself was a bitter irony. New, personal battle. What was he facing now? Just a man's disillusionment or something much deeper? The photo of Elias, young and uniformed, contrasted brutally with the image of the homeless man Ricardo had encountered. The blue scarf he now wore was not in the photo, but the dignity in his eyes, yes, seemed the same. Ricardo felt a mixture of admiration and confusion. Elias was no ordinary charlatan, but a man with a complex history, a soul that had seen the extremes of existence. The news spoke of disillusionment, of losing everything, but it didn't explain the calm, the authority in his voice. There was no mention of miracles or special gifts, only the tragedy of a war veteran. That newspaper clipping, the record of a past life, added more layers to Elias's mysterious figure, making him even more intriguing and dangerous to Ricardo's logic. The silver pen still hadn't appeared. It was a detail, a loose end that bothered him. It was as if the universe was taking away his small certainties one by one to make room for something new, something he still couldn't decipher. What else did he need to understand? The silver pen still hadn't appeared. It was a detail, a loose end that bothered him. It was as if the universe was taking away his small certainties one by one to make room for something new, something he still couldn't decipher. What else did he need to understand? Ricardo couldn't get the image of that newspaper clipping out of his head. Elias, the decorated sergeant, the war hero, transformed into a man of the streets. The story was one of human tragedy, yes, but it didn't explain the unreal promise, the almost supernatural calm. He felt there was a missing piece, a lost link between the documented past and the enigmatic present. What had happened between the post-war disillusionment and the serene figure who now spoke of miracles? That mystery consumed him. Ricardo, always so calculating, found himself obsessed, his mind revolving around Elias like a satellite orbiting an unknown planet. He couldn't simply ignore it. The seed of hope, however absurd, had been planted. He needed more information, something that could anchor Elias to reality or definitively push him into the realm of fantasy. He decided it was time to use his own resources, his network of contacts, not to discredit Elias, but to understand. He called an old law school colleague, now a renowned prosecutor, asking for a discreet investigation into a homeless war veteran. He wanted to know if there were any records, any social report, anything that could fill the gaps in the newspaper clipping. The justification was vague, a philanthropic project for veterans. Days dragged on, each longer than the last. Ricardo felt the pressure of his own mind, the dilemma between logic and intuition. João, the driver, continued to cast apprehensive glances, as if fearing his boss was getting lost in a mirage. Mr. Ricardo, with all due respect, that man. Are you sure it's worth going so deep into this? Wouldn't it be better to forget what that man said? João suggested one day, his voice filled with concern. Society, reason, everyone seemed to pull him away from that impossible promise. But Ricardo couldn't. Elias's touch on his shoulder, the vanished silver pen, the serenity amidst misery, all of it formed a mosaic that, though incomplete, contained a pattern that hypnotized him. He found himself looking at his own legs, a habit he had abandoned years ago, imagining what it would be like to feel the ground again, the strength of his own body. It was a mixture of longing and terror, the fear of allowing himself to dream and once again to fall. Then, the call came. The prosecutor, his voice formal yet curious. "Ricardo, I found something. It's not much and it's a bit strange. It seems Elias spent some time in a social shelter a few years ago, shortly after leaving the army. There's a brief admission record. Nothing criminal, just a triage report." The prosecutor paused, but what caught my attention was a note from a social worker. She described Elias as extremely lucid, despite being homeless, with an unusual ability to calm other residents in moments of crisis. And even more peculiar, reports from other inmates about Elias having predicted or interfered in minor misfortunes, such as the recovery of lost objects or the reconciliation of fights, without logical explanation. Ricardo felt a chill down his spine. An official record, a document, even from a shelter, confirmed that Elias was no ordinary charlatan. He had a history, yes, of falling, but also of a strange ability, a perception that transcended the ordinary. The social worker's report, a simple piece of paper, was the third piece of evidence, a piece that fit into the puzzle, but at the same time made it even more complex. It didn't speak of grand miracles, but of small events, of a subtle, almost magical influence. That note, with the coldness of a report, gave an unusual weight to Elias's words. The unusual ability to calm and the reports of prediction were like beacons flashing in the fog of uncertainty. Elias was not just a disillusioned ex-military man, but someone who, even in his most vulnerable condition, displayed an inexplicable gift. This did not make him a divine messenger, but it definitely removed him from the category of a simple beggar or charlatan. The lack of a logical explanation in the official report itself was what most intrigued Ricardo. It was an indirect validation that there was something more, something that science and reason could not touch. He hung up the phone, feeling the weight of that information. The silver pen, still missing, now seemed more than just a lost object. It was a symbol. The newspaper clipping showed his warrior past, the shelter report, a mysterious transition. But what connected all of this to the promise of making him walk again? The feeling that a piece was missing was almost palpable, an emptiness that Ricardo's mind, accustomed to having all the answers, could not fill. There was an invisible force there, a plot unfolding before his eyes, and he was at its center, not knowing the next step. What else did the universe hold for him to unravel? Ricardo, now with the new puzzle pieces, could no longer stand still. The uncertainty was a torment greater than resignation itself. He needed more, a final encounter, an answer to the knot that had formed in his soul. He asked João to take him back to the park without delay. That place, once a melancholy refuge, now seemed the stage of his destiny. The drizzle had given way to a timid sun, barely warming the damp grass. Elias was there at the same jacaranda tree trunk, his figure almost an extension of the tree, as if he were part of the landscape. His eyes, seeing Ricardo approach with João's help, carried the same serenity, but with a gleam that seemed to await that moment. Ricardo, without circumlocution, showed the newspaper clipping and mentioned the shelter report. "I researched you, Elias," he said, his voice firm, but with an almost imperceptible tremor. "I know your story, of the war, of the disillusionment, and I know the reports about your ability." Elias listened to everything, without moving a muscle, without a single word of surprise or defense. He merely watched Ricardo, as if he already knew everything, as if he had been expecting that confession, that search for truth. He pointed to Ricardo's chest, exactly where the silver pen used to be. "Are you still looking for what you lost, Ricardo, or what you truly need to find?" The simple question hit Ricardo hard. He was obsessed with the pen, with control, but Elias reminded him of the true emptiness. I don't know," Ricardo admitted, his voice choked. "I just want to understand." Elias then, with a slow and deliberate movement, untied the blue scarf from his neck. From within its folds, he retrieved Ricardo's silver pen. "You must let go of the ties, Ricardo. Hand over control to something greater. This pen, it was never truly lost. It was kept, waiting for the moment you were ready to see beyond what the eyes show." Ricardo felt the air leave his lungs. The silver pen, his personal object, his symbol of control, was there, in Elias's hands. Not a theft, not a trick, but a custody, a sign. Elias extended the pen to him. "Now trust. Feel the ground beneath your feet, Ricardo. Not with your mind, but with your soul." And before Ricardo could even process it, Elias placed his firm, calloused hands on the millionaire's paralyzed knees. An intense, almost electric warmth ran through his legs, something he hadn't felt in 10 years. A spark, an energy that seemed to awaken every dormant nerve. Ricardo gasped. His toes, which hadn't moved in a decade, trembled. A muscle in his thigh contracted. It was a strange sensation, painful and glorious. I'm feeling it," Ricardo whispered, his eyes wide, fixed on Elias. The homeless man merely smiled, the same restrained smile, but now with an almost divine light. "Stand up, Ricardo. Faith moves mountains, and your body is just a small hill." And with a gentle but irrefutable push, Elias helped him to his feet. Ricardo's legs wavered but did not give way. He felt the weight of his body on them, the pressure of the ground, the sensation of every fiber stretching, reconnecting. One step, then another. Unsteady, awkward, but he was standing. And then he walked. His muscles protested, his mind screamed in disbelief, but his body obeyed. He walked a few feet, the air thin in his lungs, tears streaming down his face. João, the driver, was petrified, his mouth open, his eyes moist. The miracle had happened, there in the park, under the timid sun. Ricardo felt the ground, every fiber of his body, dormant for years, awakened with a sweet pain, a promise of life. He walked, wobbling but firm under João's astonished gaze. The driver, once skeptical, now had tears in his eyes, unable to utter a word. The silence of the park was broken only by Ricardo's restrained crying, a cry of relief and gratitude that came from the depths of his soul. Elias, with the silver pen, returned to the millionaire, merely observed, a serene smile on his lips. "You see, Ricardo? Faith is the way," Elias said, his voice calm but laden with an unshakable truth. The war hero from the newspaper found the battle that truly mattered, not in the trenches but in the human heart. The predictions in the report were just the echo of a greater voice, which you can now also hear. Elias's words tied up the loose ends, giving meaning to the mysterious past, to his own story of detachment, and to the miracle that had just occurred. Ricardo felt a new purpose, an immense responsibility. He was no longer the man confined to a wheelchair, nor the isolated millionaire. He was someone who had witnessed the inexplicable. His world, once governed by logic and control, expanded to embrace what reason could not explain. He extended his hand to Elias, not in thanks, but in recognition. If this story touches something you've experienced, a moment of unwavering faith or a doubt that haunted you? Subscribe to the channel now and comment what you would do in Ricardo's place with the hashtag #InvisibleMiracle. Your support moves these stories of hope and transformation. Ricardo now understood. The silver pen which had tormented him was a reminder of surrender. Elias sought no reward. He was the bridge, the voice of something greater that whispered of faith and the richness found in vulnerability. The homeless man had given him back hope and movement. Elias, with a final nod and a serene smile, turned and walked away, blending into the park landscape. His mission was accomplished. Ricardo stood there, feeling the breeze and sun on his face, a reborn sensation. João, still in shock, approached him. The millionaire, now walking with steady steps, ambled through the park, feeling the grass and damp earth. Every step was a rediscovery. That particular twilight in his heart had dissipated. His soul, once isolated, opened up to genuine connection. In the days that followed, Ricardo continued his philanthropy with a profound difference, each gesture stemming from gratitude. He sought Elias, yes, but the homeless man seemed to have vanished. Elias's lesson, however, remained. The greatest miracle was not just walking again, but learning to see with the heart and embrace the unknown. And so, Ricardo's life, once a closed garden, blossomed for the world, inspiring many to look beyond appearances, to recognize dignity in every human being, and to believe that kindness, however invisible it may seem, always finds a way to transform lives. If this story resonated with you, if it touched your heart or made you believe a little more in the power of faith and human connection, subscribe to the channel now, leave your comment with the hashtag #InvisibleMiracle and hit that like button. Tell me where you're watching from so I can acknowledge you in upcoming videos. Thank you for staying until the end and supporting our channel.